The screech of the tires still echoed in my ears, the image of my daughter's face, streaked with tears and terror, burned behind my eyelids. The flashing lights of the police car painted the scene in sickening blues and reds, a macabre dance of injustice. I stood frozen, the gravel crunching under my feet as they led her away, my baby, my 11-year-old Sarah, her small wrists swallowed by those cold, steel restraints. They thought they had broken me. They were wrong. If you've ever felt the burning rage of a parent protecting their child, subscribe now and join a family that understands. My brother, Mark, always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my father's eyes, had made the accusation. Some childish squabble, blown out of proportion, twisted into something ugly and sinister. He claimed Sarah had threatened his son, her cousin, with a small pocketknife she used for whittling wood, a hobby I'd encouraged, a way for her to express her creativity. My father, a retired police officer himself, hadn't even bothered to ask my side of the story. He saw Mark's distress, heard his carefully crafted lies, and without a second thought, called the authorities. I tried to reason with him, to explain that Sarah would never intentionally harm anyone, that Mark was exaggerating, but his face was a mask of cold, unwavering judgment. "She needs to learn a lesson, Emily," he'd said, his voice devoid of any warmth or compassion. "This is for her own good." The words hung in the air like a shroud, suffocating me, stealing the air from my lungs. I watched, helpless, as they put her in the back of the patrol car, her small frame disappearing behind the tinted glass. The world tilted on its axis, the familiar landscape of my life suddenly warped and distorted. My father, the man who was supposed to protect me, to protect my child, had orchestrated this nightmare. And Mark, my own brother, had been his willing accomplice. The days that followed were a blur of legal jargon, social worker visits, and sleepless nights. I fought tooth and nail to get Sarah back, to prove her innocence, to expose Mark's lies. But my father stood firm, a wall of stubborn resistance. He'd convinced himself that he was doing the right thing, that he was saving Sarah from a path of delinquency. The irony was almost unbearable. He was destroying her, shattering her trust, inflicting wounds that would take years to heal. Sarah became withdrawn, silent, haunted by the memory of that day. The sparkle in her eyes, the one I cherished above all else, had dimmed, replaced by a wary, guarded look. I hated them for what they had done, for the pain they had inflicted on my precious girl. But I couldn't lash out, not yet. I had to play their game, to appear compliant, to lull them into a false sense of security. Because beneath the surface, a plan was forming, a plan for retribution, a plan to make them pay for what they had taken from us. I smiled, I nodded, I bit my tongue until it bled, all the while carefully plotting my revenge. The person I trusted most was one of them. The legal battles dragged on, each hearing a fresh wave of humiliation and despair. My savings dwindled, devoured by lawyer fees and court costs. My friends, initially supportive, began to distance themselves, their smiles strained, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and discomfort. The whispers followed me, a constant reminder of my perceived failure as a mother. At work, my performance suffered, my concentration shattered by the relentless anxiety that gnawed at my insides. I made mistakes, missed deadlines, and earned reprimands from my supervisor, a woman who had always been a staunch ally but now regarded me with suspicion. It felt like the world was closing in, suffocating me with its judgment and condemnation. Sleep became a luxury, stolen moments of fitful rest punctuated by nightmares of Sarah's tear-streaked face and the cold, indifferent eyes of my father. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of injustice pressing down on me like a physical burden. I tried to talk to Mark, to appeal to his sense of reason, to remind him of the bond we once shared as siblings. But he remained steadfast in his delusion, convinced that he was protecting his own child, even if it meant sacrificing his niece in the process. His wife, Carol, fueled his paranoia, whispering in his ear, poisoning his mind with her own twisted version of reality. They became a united front, an impenetrable wall of self-righteousness that blocked any attempt at reconciliation. I explored every avenue, every possible legal loophole, but my father's influence loomed large, casting a shadow over the entire process. He used his connections, his reputation, to sway the opinions of judges and social workers, painting me as an unfit parent, a woman incapable of providing a safe and stable environment for her child. The system, designed to protect the innocent, was being weaponized against me, twisted to serve the selfish agenda of my own family. I felt like a puppet, my strings being pulled by unseen forces, my voice silenced, my agency stripped away. Desperation began to creep in, an insidious tendril that wrapped around my heart, threatening to drag me down into the abyss. I considered drastic measures, reckless acts of defiance, but the thought of Sarah kept me grounded, reminding me that I had to remain strong, that I had to fight for her, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. So I swallowed my pride, I endured the insults, I played the role of the contrite, remorseful parent, all the while carefully gathering information, meticulously documenting every instance of their manipulation and deceit. I knew that the truth was my only weapon, and I was determined to wield it with precision and unwavering resolve. The sleepless nights were spent poring over legal documents, searching for inconsistencies, uncovering hidden agendas. I became a detective, a researcher, a strategist, driven by a single, all-consuming purpose: to reclaim my daughter and to. The strain took its toll. I lost weight, my eyes were perpetually bloodshot, and my hair began to thin. I became a ghost of my former self, a shadow lurking on the periphery of my own life. But beneath the exterior, a fire burned, a fierce, unwavering determination that fueled my every action. I started recording every conversation with my father and Mark, carefully documenting their admissions, their inconsistencies, their blatant disregard for the truth. I knew that they were arrogant, confident in their ability to control the narrative, to manipulate the system to their advantage. But they underestimated my resolve, my willingness to fight for my child. They thought they had broken me, that they had silenced me. But they were wrong. I was merely biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, to unleash the full force of my carefully orchestrated plan. They wouldn't see it coming. They believed they had all the power, but they had forgotten one crucial thing: the unwavering love of a mother. And that love, when twisted into a force for retribution, was a weapon more powerful than any legal maneuver or social connection. The day was coming when they would learn the true meaning of regret, when they would understand the devastating consequences of their actions. And on that day, I would be there to witness their downfall, to savor the sweet taste of justice finally served. The day Sarah's temporary custody was officially granted to Mark and Carol felt like a physical blow. I remember the sterile smell of the courtroom, the triumphant smirk on Carol's face, the carefully neutral expression of the judge. My father wasn't even there. Too cowardly to witness the destruction he had wrought, I assumed. The drive home was a blur. I parked the car, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. The house felt empty, hollowed out, devoid of the laughter and light that Sarah had brought into it. I sat there for hours, the engine running, the headlights cutting through the gathering darkness, until the fuel gauge blinked red, a stark reminder of my dwindling resources. Finally, I turned off the ignition and stumbled inside, the silence amplifying the emptiness that threatened to consume me. I wandered through the rooms, touching Sarah's things: her favorite stuffed animal, a half-finished drawing, a pair of tiny shoes, each object a painful reminder of what I had lost. I sank onto her bed, burying my face in her pillow, inhaling the faint scent of lavender and sunshine that still clung to the fabric. The tears came then, a torrent of grief and despair that racked my body, leaving me gasping for breath. I cried until my eyes were swollen and bloodshot, until my throat was raw, until I had nothing left to give. I stayed in bed for 3 days. I didn't eat, I didn't shower, I didn't answer the phone. The world outside faded into a distant, muffled hum, as if I were trapped inside a soundproof box. My boss called, then my friends, then my mother, their voices laced with concern and exasperation. I ignored them all. What was the point? They couldn't understand the depth of my pain, the utter devastation that had swallowed me whole. They couldn't bring Sarah back. On the 3rd day, I woke up to find a notice taped to my door, an eviction notice. I had fallen behind on my rent, my savings depleted by the legal battle. Now, I was not only without my daughter but also without a home. It was the final straw. The last vestige of hope flickered and died, leaving me adrift in a sea of despair. I considered ending it all, finding a way to escape the relentless pain, to silence the voices that haunted my waking hours. The thought was a seductive whisper, a promise of oblivion, a release from the unbearable burden of grief. I went to the bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet, and stared at the array of pills, each one a potential escape route. My hand trembled as I reached for a bottle, the cool glass a stark contrast to the feverish heat of my skin. But then, I saw it. Sarah's toothbrush, standing in a small cup on the sink. A tiny, insignificant object, yet it held the weight of 1,000 memories. I remembered brushing her teeth every night, her small hand clutching mine, her bright eyes sparkling with mischief. I remembered the silly songs we would sing, the stories we would tell, the bedtime rituals that had woven themselves into the fabric of our lives. And in that moment, I realized that giving up wasn't an option. Not for her. I couldn't abandon her, not when she needed me the most. She was counting on me to fight for her, to bring her home. And I wouldn't let her down. The pills remained untouched. I closed the medicine cabinet, my hand shaking, but my resolve firm. The tears still flowed, but they were different now, not tears of despair, but tears of determination. I was broken, yes, but I was not defeated. They had taken everything from me, but they hadn't taken my spirit, my will to fight. I would use their cruelty as fuel, their lies as a roadmap, their arrogance as their undoing. I would become the storm they never saw coming. I started small. First, I contacted a local legal aid organization, explaining my situation, laying out the evidence I had gathered. They were initially skeptical, wary of getting involved in a messy family dispute. But when I played the recordings I had made of my father and Mark, their expressions changed. They saw the manipulation, the deceit, the blatant disregard for the truth. They agreed to take my case, pro bono, assigning me a young, ambitious lawyer named David, who was eager to prove himself. David was a godsend. He was smart, resourceful, and fiercely dedicated to my cause. He saw the injustice that had been perpetrated against me and Sarah, and he was determined to set things right. Together, we reviewed the evidence, analyzed the legal loopholes, and formulated a new strategy, one that focused on exposing the lies and the manipulation that had led to Sarah's removal. I also started documenting everything, every conversation, every interaction, every detail, no matter how insignificant it seemed. I knew that the truth was my most powerful weapon, and I was determined to wield it with precision and unwavering resolve. I transformed. The grief-stricken, defeated woman who had crawled into bed 3 days earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating strategist, focused on one goal: retribution. I smiled. They thought I was done. But the game had just begun. I smiled, I played their game, but I was recording everything. Hidden microphones became my constant companions, tucked into my purse, clipped to my clothing, even disguised as ordinary household objects. Every conversation with my father, every interaction with Mark and Carol, was meticulously documented, each word scrutinized for inconsistencies, for cracks in their carefully constructed facade. It was a dangerous game. One slip-up could expose my plan and ruin everything. But the risk was worth it. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would shatter their lies and expose them for who they truly were. I learned to control my emotions, to mask my anger and resentment with a veneer of polite indifference. I attended family gatherings, endured their condescending remarks, and swallowed my pride, all the while gathering ammunition for my impending strike. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I knew that I had to persevere, that Sarah was counting on me. David, my lawyer, became my confidant, my sounding board, my partner in crime. We spent hours poring over legal documents, dissecting their arguments, and identifying their weaknesses. He taught me the intricacies of the legal system, the art of cross-examination, the power of forensic evidence. I learned about digital forensics, how to recover deleted files, how to trace internet. One evening, while babysitting my nephew, Mark's son, I found myself alone in their home office. Carol had left her computer unlocked, a blatant oversight that I couldn't ignore. I knew it was a risky move, but I had to take the chance. I quickly downloaded a program onto a USB drive, a program designed to copy every file, every email, every document on the hard drive without leaving a trace. It took nearly an hour, my heart pounding in my chest, every creak of the floorboards sending shivers down my spine. Just as the program finished, I heard Carol's car pull into the driveway. I quickly ejected the USB drive, wiped my fingerprints from the keyboard, and slipped out of the office, just as she walked through the front door. It was a close call, too close for comfort. But the risk had paid off. The USB drive contained a treasure trove of information, emails detailing their conspiracy, financial records exposing their hidden assets, even a draft of a letter to the judge filled with lies and fabricated evidence. David was ecstatic. This was the smoking gun we needed, the evidence that would finally expose their deceit and bring Sarah home. The next step was to gather evidence of my father's involvement. This was more difficult. He was a seasoned law enforcement professional, careful and meticulous, not prone to leaving a paper trail. But I knew his weakness, his pride. He believed himself to be above the law, untouchable, immune to the consequences of his actions. I decided to use that arrogance against him. I started subtly questioning him about the case, feigning ignorance, playing the role of the confused and desperate mother seeking his guidance. He lapped it up, reveling in his perceived superiority, eager to explain his reasoning, to justify his actions. And as he talked, I recorded. I baited him with leading questions, prompting him to reveal his involvement in the manipulation of the evidence, his influence over the social workers and the judge. He never suspected a thing, blinded by his own self-importance. I even managed to get him to admit that Mark's son was a liar and his father knew it, that Sarah was innocent. The day I captured that confession, I felt a surge of triumph, a sense of vindication that washed away months of pain and despair. We were ready. The stage was set. The players were in place. The final act was about to begin. The waiting was the hardest part. I knew that they were planning something, that they were preparing to make their final move to permanently strip me of my parental rights. I could feel it in their smug glances, their veiled threats, their air of quiet confidence. They thought they had won, that they had broken me, that they were finally rid of me. But they were wrong. I was simply biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash my carefully orchestrated plan. David filed a motion to introduce new evidence, citing irregularities in the original investigation, inconsistencies in the testimony, and potential conflicts of interest. The judge, initially reluctant, was forced to grant the motion, setting the stage for a final hearing. The date was set. The countdown had begun. I barely slept in the days leading up to the hearing, my mind racing, replaying every detail, anticipating every possible scenario. I knew that this was it, the culmination of months of planning, the moment of truth. If I failed, I would lose Sarah forever. But I couldn't afford to fail. I owed it to her, to myself, to expose the truth and reclaim our lives. I envisioned their faces when the truth came out, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization that they had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and utterly defeated. The thought fueled me, giving me the strength to face the final battle. The day was coming when they would learn the true meaning of regret, when they would understand the devastating consequences of their actions. And on that day, I would be there to witness their downfall, to savor the sweet. The key to everything, I realized, was Carol's insatiable need to control. She micromanaged every aspect of Mark's life, her son's life, and, by extension, Sarah's. Her emails revealed a woman obsessed with appearances, terrified of losing her social standing, and willing to do anything to maintain the illusion of perfection. But it wasn't just appearances, it was money. Mountains of it hidden in offshore accounts, shell corporations, and real estate holdings that Mark knew nothing about. This wasn't just about Sarah, this was about a criminal enterprise, and Sarah was simply collateral damage. The leverage I needed wasn't just about getting my daughter back, it was about bringing Carol's entire world crashing down around her. David uncovered a pattern of embezzlement from her family's charitable foundation, funds diverted to her personal accounts and used to finance her lavish lifestyle. The amounts were staggering, enough to land her in prison for decades. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. Carol's weakness wasn't just her arrogance, it was her greed. And I knew exactly how to exploit it. I crafted an anonymous email, meticulously worded, hinting at my knowledge of her financial improprieties. I detailed specific transactions, account numbers, and dates, information that only an insider could possess. I made it clear that I was prepared to expose her crimes to the authorities unless she met my demands, Sarah's immediate and unconditional return. I sent the email late one night, then waited, my nerves stretched to the breaking point. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Carol, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. She demanded a meeting, alone. I agreed, choosing a public park, a place where I felt safe, a place with witnesses. When she arrived, she was a mess, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, her eyes darting nervously around the park. She immediately launched into a tirade, accusing me of extortion, of trying to ruin her life. I remained calm, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. I told her that I didn't want her money, I didn't want her possessions, I only wanted my daughter back. I laid out my terms. Sarah would be returned to me within 24 hours, no questions asked, no legal challenges, no further contact. If she failed to comply, I would deliver the evidence to the authorities, effectively destroying her life and her family's reputation. Carol paced back and forth, her mind racing, her options dwindling. She tried to negotiate, to offer me money, to promise me visitation rights. I refused to budge. I knew that any compromise would be a betrayal of Sarah, a surrender to her manipulative tactics. I stood my ground, my silence more powerful than any words. Finally, she cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, her voice broke, and she whispered, "Okay, okay. You win. You'll get Sarah back." But I knew that she couldn't be trusted, that she would try to find a way to double-cross me, to weasel out of the agreement. So I had another card to play. I informed her that I had made copies of all the evidence and distributed them to several trusted individuals, with instructions to release them to the media if anything happened to me or to Sarah. I also made it clear that I had recorded our entire conversation. Carol's face went white. She knew that she was trapped. I gave her specific instructions. Sarah was to be dropped off at my house the following evening at 6 p.m. sharp. No Mark, no lawyers, no social workers. Just Sarah. And if Carol dared to try anything at all, I would unleash the full force of my carefully orchestrated plan. Carol, defeated and humiliated, slunk away, leaving me alone in the park, the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. I went home and started preparing for Sarah's return. I cleaned her room, washed her clothes, stocked her favorite snacks. I wanted everything to be perfect, to erase the memory of her absence, to create a safe and loving environment where she could heal and thrive. But beneath the surface, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. I knew that Carol wouldn't give up easily, that she would be plotting her revenge, searching for a way to turn the tables. I had to be prepared for anything. As darkness fell, I sat by the window, watching the street, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for the moment when my daughter would finally be home. 6 o'clock came and went. No Sarah. Panic flared. Had Carol betrayed me? Was this a trap? I picked up the phone to call David, but before I could dial, headlights appeared down the street. A car pulled up to the curb in front of my house. It was Carol. Alone. The back door opened, and a small figure emerged, hesitantly, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. It was Sarah. She looked thinner, paler, more withdrawn than I remembered. But she was alive. She was safe. She was home. But as Sarah took her first step toward me, I saw something in the rearview mirror of Carol's car that made my blood run cold. A figure in the shadows, a glint of steel, a silent promise of violence. This wasn't over. It was far from over. As Sarah took her first hesitant step toward me, I saw it, the glint of moonlight on cold steel, reflecting from a knife in the hand of a shadowy figure lurking in Carol's back seat. Time seemed to compress, every millisecond drawn out in excruciating detail. Without thinking, I lunged forward, shoving Sarah out of the path of the oncoming car just as Carol slammed the vehicle into gear, aiming to silence us both. The tires screeched, the engine roared, and the knife-wielding figure lunged from the open door. It wasn't Mark. It was a hired thug, his face a mask of cold determination. He swung the blade, aiming for my chest, but I sidestepped, years of pent-up rage fueling my reflexes. The knife grazed my arm, leaving a searing trail of pain, but I didn't falter. I grabbed a nearby garden shovel, the metal heavy and solid in my grip, and swung it with all my might, connecting with the side of his head. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Carol, seeing her plan dissolve in a spray of crimson, panicked. She threw the car into reverse, smashing into a parked car across the street, then floored it, disappearing into the night. I barely registered her escape. My only thought was Sarah. I scooped her up in my arms, holding her tight, burying my face in her hair, whispering reassurances that she was safe, that I would never let anyone hurt her again. The police arrived moments later, sirens blaring, lights flashing, illuminating the scene of chaos and near tragedy. The aftermath was a whirlwind of interviews, investigations, and legal proceedings. Carol was apprehended a few days later, attempting to flee the country with a suitcase full of cash. She was charged with attempted assault, conspiracy, and a long list of financial crimes, including embezzlement and fraud. Mark, initially claiming ignorance, quickly crumbled under questioning, revealing the extent of Carol's manipulation and control. He, too, faced charges, though his cooperation earned him a lighter sentence. My father, exposed for his complicity in the conspiracy, was stripped of his badge and his reputation, his career in law enforcement ending in disgrace. He tried to apologize, to explain his actions, but his words rang hollow. The damage was done. He had betrayed his own daughter, and the consequences were irreversible. As for Carol, her world imploded. Her carefully constructed facade of wealth and respectability shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. Her family disowned her, her friends abandoned her, and her assets were seized. She faced the prospect of spending decades in prison, a fitting punishment for her greed and her cruelty. During the trial, the evidence I had gathered, the recordings, the emails, the financial records, proved irrefutable. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of Sarah and awarding me substantial damages. But the money meant nothing. All I wanted was my daughter, and I finally had her back. Seeing Carol led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of defeated fury, brought a cold satisfaction. My father watched in silence, the weight of his actions etched on his face. Mark just stared at the floor. They lost everything. I just smiled. The scars of their betrayal would likely remain, but Sarah and I were finally free. We moved away, started a new life, far from the shadow of their lies and manipulations. Sarah thrived in her new environment, blossoming into a confident and happy young woman. We rebuilt our relationship, stronger and more resilient than before. The nightmares eventually faded, replaced by a sense of peace and security. Years later, sitting on the porch with Sarah, watching the sunset, I reflected on the events that had led us to this moment. The pain, the betrayal, the struggle for justice. It had been a long and arduous journey, but we had emerged from the darkness, scarred but not broken. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's about reclaiming what was stolen, about holding those who have caused harm accountable for their actions. It's about protecting the innocent. It's about sending a message that injustice will not be tolerated. And sometimes, it's the only way to heal. Would you have done